And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, episode number 32. To all you new listeners out there, hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by here today. As I said, my name is Mike, and I'm a wedding photographer based here in Sydney, Australia. Each week on the show, I bring you guys along on the highs and lows of my own creative journey, and share all the knowledge that I've gained along the road to building my own freelance business. This week's episode is a bonus episode. I'm releasing this on a Friday. I normally release episodes on a Monday. I hope you guys would be aware of that if you are a regular listener around here. But I was just at home this week during lockdown and I thought I'm not really up to much, so why not record an extra episode of the podcast? I've been really enjoying this process recently and it's good to get out more episodes out there. I think a lot of people are starting to actually listen to these episodes during lockdown. I think I'm providing a lot of value for people, hearing from a lot of people that they're really enjoying these episodes. So I thought I would try to provide as much value as I possibly can and get another episode out there while I'm just at home and not really up to much at all at the moment. In terms of what's been going on this week, well, I released my print store on Tuesday. The last episode came out on Monday, and if you guys listened to episode 31, you would have been aware of that. My print store is live now. It's live until next Tuesday night, so the end of August 2021, and it's been very successful so far. In the past 3 days, as I'm recording this on the Thursday afterwards, in the past 3 days, already had over 200 people actually view the site, and to me that's incredible because if I actually had a store, to have 200 people actually walk in and view my art in some sort of store, like in some sort of storefront or art gallery like that, would be incredible, really. So to have that many people have already visited the website and looked at the variety of images on there is really incredible to me, and very, I suppose, makes me very happy and sort of drives me forward in the future to see that this is actually generating momentum from where it was last year to where it is now, and to see so many people actually talking about it and sharing it around and actually receiving a lot of messages from a lot of different people saying about how much they've really appreciated the work that I've done and how much they think that the work I'm doing is amazing. So that is really nice as well, and it's great to actually get out there and put it out there in the world. I did actually get my first sale as well, which is incredible. I've been really stressed over the past couple of weeks thinking that if I launch this and I don't have anyone actually buy anything, what is the sort of repercussions on that? Not really that there are any repercussions in the actual world, but more so on my actual feelings and how do I take that? How do I keep moving forward after that if something was to happen like that where no one was purchasing anything, or where there was no sort of reception to it, no one actually went and viewed it, no one actually really cared at all. And I think I sort of was in my own head about that, always expecting the worst. And so for me, having it out there was a big stress, but now to know that so many people have gone and viewed it and actually some people have actually purchased artworks on there is incredible as well. So to think that I've gone from a week ago having no one have any of my art to now having people purchase pieces of my art, to be that type of photographer that actually has pieces of art out there in the world is incredible. It's been an amazing journey for me coming through from the last time I launched my print store last year and sort of the sort of change in me and my own mentality, but also the change in improving the store, and as I spoke about in the last episode, to doing all the work. And I really have been thinking about through the week about why people don't put themselves out there more, why they don't open themselves up to that, open themselves up to sort of failure, I guess, in a way, because that is something that I was feeling a lot through the week, and something I was feeling that if I didn't succeed, if I didn't actually sell any prints, if I didn't get it in front of people, if there wasn't that positive reception around it, I was really scared of that. And so I can sort of see from other people's perspective on why they don't want to put themselves out there, because that is a scary situation to be in. And we're not going to sort of try to beat around the bush on that, because it is a scary situation. And to think that so many people are possibly avoiding that is a bit sad, but also I can see where it's coming from. So that is really what I really want to touch on today. And I really want to dive into some of the things behind why people are caring too much about what other people think and not really doing what they really want to do, and not putting themselves out there into positions where they could fail, but most of all, they're probably going to succeed, and they're not aware of the ways which they can succeed. And that comes from that sort of negative mindset. And we're going to sort of speak about that a little bit in this episode. Just before I jump into that, I want to let you guys know that the print store is open until next Tuesday night, as I said, the end of August 2021. So if you're listening to it before then, it is open. I'll leave a link to it in the description wherever you're listening to this podcast, on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. I'll leave a link to it down there. it's open. If you're interested, as anyone who's listening to this podcast, interested in being able to have your own sort of products, just go and have a look at the site and see how it's all set out, see what the store looks like, see what it's like behind the scenes to actually have something. I know I spend a lot of time on other people's websites. I spend a lot of time in all different varieties of websites, not just photographers, but trying to see what they do in their marketing, what they do online in their online stores and things like that, to try and grasp how I should go about it. So if I can provide that, and if I'm having this up there to seed for you guys, if that is something you're interested in having a look at from that perspective, that's amazing as well. If you'd also like to purchase a piece of art, by all means, I would really appreciate that, but you definitely don't have to. And by being here and supporting me on this podcast is enough support for me, and I really appreciate that. Anyone who turns up here and listens to me speak for half hour to an hour every week is a real supporter of mine, and I really do appreciate you guys. So if you are interested, it's open until next Tuesday, so go and have a look at that and check that out. The other thing that I wanted to point out is my new art display behind me here. If you guys have been watching the video version of the podcast for the last couple of weeks, I haven't actually had anything on this wall behind me. It's a little bit of an eyesore, to be honest, because it's just a blank, stark wall, and it really was annoying me a little bit. So I did have a message through the week to actually change it. So I thought, well, why not just hang a few of my artworks behind me? Why not? I really enjoy these artworks. They've just been taking up space on the shelf for the past year, so I thought I'd now hang them up. I used to have my desk up against this wall, so I just recently moved my desk out from the wall to give me a bit more space behind me, and so that's why I didn't have anything on the wall for a few weeks. I was a bit slack in not actually hanging anything on the wall, but do let me know what you think of the display behind me. Does it add a bit more to the actual image? I feel like it does, and I feel like it adds to the video podcast. Is something that I really didn't think about when I was starting a video podcast, is having that, and I really didn't want to put too much pressure on where I was recording, but I think it is nice to have something behind me. I don't want this episode to be too long. As I said, this is a bit of a bonus episode because it was something that I was thinking about through the week, but I think it's an important one nonetheless, and I'm going to jump straight into it today. Hopefully we can get started on this quite quick and sort of get into some of the reasons why people are scared about what other people think, and scared about jumping into new things, and scared about really being able to put themselves out there. And I think it is a scary prospect, and we're not going to try and hide that. But I want to speak about some of the ways we can overcome that, and some of the ways that I think can help improve your own sort of mentality and your own mindset around those sorts of things. So the first thing I really want to do is touch on the signs that would start to make it obvious that you're caring too much about what other people have to think of you. And the first one that I can think of is something we touched on last week, and that is you are too much of a perfectionist. Now, I think we spoke about it a lot last week, and I'm not going to dive back into it too much today, but perfectionism really stems from caring too much about what other people think, because you're only aspiring to be perfect to try and impress other people, or trying to make it perceive that you're perfect. So the idea of perfectionism there really stems back to caring too much about what other people have to think about you, and not enough on what you have to think about yourself. Obviously, there are positive and negative aspects, and we spoke about that last week, but I think as a general rule, if you're too much of a perfectionist, you're probably the type of person who is going to care too much about what other people think of you. The other big one is someone who doesn't set or maintain boundaries. Now, if you don't set or maintain boundaries of yourself, you allow people to walk all over you, and you will allow yourself to be easily changed, and you will allow yourself to be easily influenced by what other people have to say of you. So if you're someone who responds to criticism and automatically changes the way you are based on criticism, regardless of whether that criticism comes from the right place, regardless of whether that criticism is actually from someone who knows what they're talking about, regardless of whether that criticism was actually a positive or negative thing, you change in order to suit that person's agenda. So if you're that type of person, you're probably someone who is caring too much about what other people think. The other one that I've struggled with before is placing your happiness too much on other people's opinions. And now this may not necessarily be that you care what other people think, but you really place your happiness too much on other people's sort of approval in certain types of areas. And I know that I've struggled with this before. I know that I've sort of felt like I can only be in a positive mindset when other people are approving of the work that I'm trying to do, or other people are really enjoying the stuff that I'm creating, other people are always messaging me, then that's when I'll start to feel the best. If all of a sudden I go for a spell where I'm not getting any messages of anyone, I'm not getting any reactions from any people, I'm not getting that sort of outside gratification, you can start to fall back into that trap of not feeling like you're adequate enough. And so that is probably a point where you got to pull yourself back and think, maybe I'm caring too much about what other people have to say about you. The other types of things could be things like you're always apologizing for things you do, even if it's not your fault. You're just always trying to make people happy. You're trying to please other people, even though you may not have been in the wrong. The other thing that comes about with that is you're having a conversation with someone, you disagree on their opinion. You won't put your opinion out there because your opinion differs from theirs. You'll just agree with them. And so you can be a very agreeable person. You can also end up being someone who apologizes too much for things that you may not have done wrong. And I think those are really some of the big ones and some of the big things to look out for. The last one I really want to touch on, and something that I've struggled with before, I think I've even made an episode on this before, is you are someone who rarely says no to people. Now, rarely saying no to people can come as a result of trying to be someone who pleases too many types of people. You're trying to please everyone, and that isn't ever going to work out in the way that you think it is. And so you really need to come back and really think more about yourself and in a way be a bit more selfish about it, because sometimes it's better to think about you, and sometimes you have to think about yourself in those sorts of ways, because there isn't anyone else out there who's thinking about you. So you have to really take it upon yourself to think about you and really put yourself first, and then you can start to agree to other people's things. So if you fall into any of those categories, probably what I'm going to say today will hopefully help you. I know it's helped me in the past, and I know some of these things have really helped me to overcome some of those things where I am scared to put myself out there because I'm scared of what other people will think of me. And I have been known to be someone who cares too much about what other people think of me in the past. And so I thought that I could really use my own story and try to relate that for you guys and sort of give you something that you can sort of work towards in the future. As we go forward today, I want to touch on 7 steps that I think sort of progress through the stages of really caring about what people think, but then also the stages of how we can really stop caring what people think and really start to really put ourselves out there a lot more, because I think in the end that is the aim, and I think that is what we're trying to strive towards here. So I'm going to start off small with some things you probably already know, and then I'm going to start to build up into some other things that I think you can do moving forward, and some of the things we can sort of take away from today's episode. So the first thing that I really want to say is that it's okay. It is human nature to care what other people think, and you shouldn't be feeling bad for actually caring what other people think. It's very much human nature and very much in our DNA to have a fear of the negative evaluations of other people, because to be honest, humans evolved to be a part of a tribe. Now, we all would like to feel like we're a part of something, and so to feel excluded from that can be really hard on the ego. And so we have to sort of understand that that is okay. That's part of our DNA. That's part of being human, is not wanting to be cast out from any particular type of group. And feeling that can be very anxiety provoking. You can feel like if you're going to get cast away, having someone else have a negative opinion on you can be very anxiety provoking. And so the first thing that I really want to say is that is okay. It's okay to feel that way, because a lot of people feel that way, and you shouldn't have to feel like that's a real bad thing you need to axe out of yourself, because it's okay to feel that way. In the end, it's really good to care what other people think, because if you didn't, you'd probably be in some sort of category on your own where you're a really strange person who doesn't care what anyone else thinks, and that probably wouldn't be a great place to be. You really want to still care about the right people's opinions, but you don't want to care about everyone's opinions, and that's really what we're going to touch on today. Everyone will have an opinion. You just need to accept that fact, and you need to move on from it. Everyone's going to have something to say whenever you do something, and it's in their human nature to have something to say. As I said, it's in your human nature to be really caring about what they have to think, but in the same respect, it's in their human nature to have an opinion on what you do. Whether they choose to voice that opinion is on them, but they will have something to think about it, regardless of whether they actually say something to you or not, or they just have a thought in their own head. It's up to you how you respond to that thought, and it's up to you whether you really take that on board in a negative way, or you can take that as a positive thing and move on from it. In the end, the only person's opinion that matters is yours. So if you're happy with what it is, if you're happy with the decisions you're making, then caring about other people's opinions doesn't really add anything to your life. It doesn't add anything to the trajectory that you're on going forward, because if you're happy with what you're doing, other people who haven't done that before can't then provide you with advice on that moving forward, because they don't actually have any idea. If you're not taking advice from people who genuinely have a grounded opinion in what it is you're trying to do, if you're not accepting advice of anyone, then that can start to become a little bit messy there. But on a whole, most people don't understand what it is you're trying to do. So taking advice from those type of people, or really caring about what their opinion is at all, is not going to result in a good thing. Just, you need to be aware that they are going to have opinions, but we don't need to always take those on board. In that vein, the second thing that I really want to speak on is that the opinions of others reflect more on them than it does on you. Now, I think this is a big one that people tend to get caught up in that if they have an opinion of me, then it must be correct. When really the opinion they're reflecting on you isn't saying that it was really striking to them that you did X, Y, and Z wrong. It's more striking that they actually came to those conclusions because most of the time it's based on something that they don't like in themselves. So, for example, if someone was to judge me over being on this podcast, I don't get any messages about people saying how bad it is. But just for an example, if someone was to judge me for actually having this podcast here and for actually speaking my own truth on this podcast and for having my own opinions on things, if someone was to judge me on that, maybe that stems from them being too scared to start their own podcast. Maybe that stems from the fact that they would like more people to actually listen to what they have to say. Maybe that stems from the fact that they're too scared to give their own opinions on things. So we have to be aware that it doesn't necessarily mean that what I'm doing is a bad thing just because they say it's a bad thing. It's normally the opposite in the fact that they wish they could do what you are currently in a position to do. So they're scared to start that particular thing, so they're going to take their anger out on you, and you need to be acutely aware of that because most of the time the things people are saying are actually positive, but they're being reflected in a negative way because they are things that other people wish they could do but are too scared to do, so they're going to reflect it in a negative way and try to make you feel bad for trying to do that thing that they wish they could do. So in the end, understand that and understand that most of that stems from them being scared to actually do it themselves, and so they're going to try and drag you down. It's most of the case when people are going to actually voice their opinion on these types of things that is even more true because, as I said, everyone's going to have an opinion on everything. I have an opinion on a lot of different things, but it doesn't mean I need to voice that opinion. It doesn't mean that my opinion particularly matters in a particular area, so I'm not going to have anything to say about it. Of course, I'm going to have a particular thought on everything I see because if I didn't have any thoughts in my head, I don't think I'd be alive, you know what I mean? So everyone's going to have a thought, but whether they actually voice that as an opinion and whether they actually go and tell the other person is a completely different thing. So most of the time when someone's actually voicing their opinion that they have and actually projecting it onto you, it's a reflection on them. It's a reflection that they wish they could do what you are doing, and remembering that and sort of using that to actually bring you up can be a really good thing, because if you recognize that by other people being highly critical of what you're doing just means it's probably the right thing to do. And anything that is hard probably is the right thing to do. And so you should continue on with it because it will eventually get easier. And hopefully the other person can find it within themselves to actually take that next step and move on and actually try something for themselves. Third point I want to touch on is trying to please everyone. Now, this is the easiest way to not please anyone. I've spoken about this before on the podcast in my own business. Trying to please everyone, trying to have everyone in my audience, in my sort of target market would end up I wouldn't have anyone in my target market. I wouldn't be targeting anyone. I wouldn't have anyone in my audience because I'm not actually targeting anyone in particular. I'm trying to put it out there to as many people and trying to impress as many people as I possibly can. You are always going to upset someone. You're always going to offend someone by what it is you do. You can't ever steer clear of that. There's always going to be someone who doesn't approve of what you do. But that's okay because you're not targeting them anyway. So if you recognize who it is that you're aiming whatever it is you do towards, if you know what it is you're trying to do, if you know the reason behind why you do something, then it's much easier to ignore those opinions of the people who aren't in your target market. I, here in this podcast, am not trying to speak to people who have multi-million-dollar businesses. So if someone who did have a very successful business came to me and said I was stupid because I didn't know X, Y, and Z, I'm okay with that because I'm not trying to educate them. And I don't think they would even have the time of day to say that, but that's just an example, right? I'm not trying to aim this podcast at them. I'm not trying to aim anything I do at them. I'm trying to aim it at people who are in a position like me, who are trying to start their own business, or trying to start their own creative journey, and I'm trying to educate those type of people. So for people to have an opinion on things, you can't please everyone. You can't please everyone in every different area, and understanding that and trying to jump over that hurdle of thinking that you need to impress as many people as possible. Because I think a lot of people, when they initially start out, think that if I can impress everyone, then I'm going to have all these followers and everyone's going to really like my work and I'm going to really grow really quickly. That isn't always necessarily the case, because if you're not really targeting anyone, if you're not really targeting a specific area, if you're not in a particular niche of work, if you're not in a particular area, then you're not going to please anyone. It's the same example for me when I go out to eat at a restaurant. If I open up the menu at a restaurant and they have all different types of meals from all different types of cuisines on there, if they had an all-day menu with all their breakfast items, through the lunch items, to the dinner items, all in one menu from all different types of cuisines, that would just be way too much. And they're trying to please too many people. And as a result, probably the chef at the back isn't going to do as great of a job on actually preparing all those meals because they are across such a wide variety of meals. And there's no way they could know how to cook all those different types of things. So if I order something, chances are it's not going to be amazing. And so I'm never going to go back there. That is the reason I go to a particular restaurant based on what I want to eat. So I know that they specialize in that one particular thing, and I'm happy when I walk in that door that I know they specialize in that particular thing. If I was walking into an Indian restaurant and I really wanted Chinese, I couldn't be offended at the people at the Indian restaurant because they didn't have Chinese on the menu. I couldn't be offended that after they served me the meal, it isn't what I expected it to be, because in the beginning it was very clear that this is what it was. And if you're going to get offended by the fact that it wasn't what you wanted it to be when you were told up front what it was, then that is really on you. So all I'm trying to get at here is just to understand that you can't please everyone. You don't need to please everyone. That's really not the aim here. The aim is not to please everyone. The aim is firstly to try and please yourself and trying to be happy with the work you're producing. And hopefully you can grow a community around what it is you're trying to do based on the area that you're in. Now, the next point that I want to raise is a little bit contradictory to what I have been saying, but I think it still stands true, and I think a lot of people will understand this, is that why do you think other people would actually care about you? I think, and I have said it before, that I think people are way too caught up in what they're doing and what they're doing in their own life and stressing about what they have to do to be actually caring about you. And I think this goes back on the other point that most of what people think about you is a reflection on them, because they're not actually caring about who it is on the other side of the screen. They really couldn't care. They're just having a look at someone who's trying to do something that they really want to do. So if you're out there opening your own business and they see that as a reflection on them that they're not opening their own business, right? So they immediately feel bad for that. That doesn't have anything to do with you. So they're not caring about what you have to do. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Don't be so selfish to think that other people really care about you. Don't be so selfish to think that all of your Instagram followers really care about you. That's all they're tuning into Instagram for every single day, is to know what you're up to because they really want to be like you. Chances are they probably don't, and chances are they're really having a look at a lot of different people and really trying to see what they can do with their own life. So don't be that selfish person who thinks that everyone out there is caring about them, because in the end, they're too busy worrying about them. You're too busy worrying about you because you're caring what other people are thinking about you. So you're too busy caring about what it is you're going to do next because you're stressing too much over what your next move should be because you're too busy worrying about what other people think of you, when chances are they're still worrying about themselves and they're probably having the same opinions of why they can't do things because they're worried about what other people will say. So don't get yourself caught up in thinking that other people are worried about you and what it is you're doing. They're worried about the activity. They're worried about the particular thing that you're trying to do. And so overall, it's probably a form of flattery that they're actually caring about the activity that you do because they probably think it's a good thing. And chances are they wish they could do it for themselves. Expanding on that, my next point is if you do actually cop criticism, understanding whether that is good or bad criticism. Now, there can be two different types, and I don't like to use the word criticism because I think it has sort of negative connotations around it. So that would sort of be the bad type. Whereas I think the good type can be constructive feedback. You can get feedback from a lot of different people. And I get messages of people all the time saying that they really like my work, but they think I could improve on X, Y, and Z. Or they think that if I did this, I might improve because it's really helped them, so they think it could help me. And I think that's really important. I really appreciate that when anyone messages me that. I've got to sort of be able to put my pride aside in that moment and not take that as a negative, not take that as they're just out to hurt me, but because really they're probably out trying to help me. They're probably only handing me that advice because it's helped them. It's just like me handing this podcast out. I'm not trying to tell everyone that's listening to this podcast that this is exactly what you have to do. I'm trying to say this has worked for me, so it may work for you, and I hope it is able to help you. It would be a completely different situation, though, if I was to send this podcast individually as an audio recording to every single person who I've ever spoken to. That would feel like a personal attack on them because they couldn't put their pride aside and just see that I'm trying to help them, just see that I'm trying to give them information that has worked for me. Whereas when it's in this podcast, you're actually choosing to come and listen to what I have to say. So therefore, it's on you. I'm just trying to hand my advice here, so that's the best I can do. Whereas when people try to give you some sort of feedback, you've really got to have it in that headspace to think that they're not trying to hurt you. They're just trying to give you some positive feedback. Now, the other end of the spectrum of that is, of course, some people are actually out trying to hurt you, and I don't know why anyone would possibly want to send someone a message to try and hurt them, but there are those people in the world. And you need to know when to differentiate that between someone who is actually trying to hurt you and someone who's not. Because most of the time, it's not people trying to hurt you. Most of the time, it's people trying to hand feedback because they've done just exactly what you're trying to do. If I started this podcast, a lot of people who've started a podcast before, if they were to message me and say, I've done this before, I think this could really help you, I'm not taking that as a negative thing. I'm not taking them as them saying everything I did in that first episode was bad. I'm taking that as here's X ways I can improve from people who have already tried to do that before and have succeeded on it. So I should be accepting that feedback and using it to my advantage, because it's not something that anyone else, it's not something that's widely available out there, because these people aren't advertising it out there in the world. They're just trying to hand me advice. So understanding that, and understanding that people will have an opinion, and sometimes that opinion is okay. Sometimes that opinion is to try and help you because they've been in that situation before. And so knowing when to accept that opinion and knowing when to move on from other people's criticisms is super important. My next point, and point number 6, is that we need to rewire our brain for positive thinking. Now, of course, everyone knows this is true, but I think in this sense, most people tend to fall into the negatives. As I said last week, and as I've said in many episodes before, a lot of people try to fall into the negatives. And you need to think about what you can gain from a scenario rather than what you can lose. Now, it's a negative mindset to think that people having opinions of you is the only outcome that you can get from any particular situation. Now, you have to be able to think about what you could possibly gain from that. If it is whatever you want to do, if you want to start a podcast, you got to think about what you could gain from that rather than what you could copy in criticism from other people. Now, chances are you're not going to get any sort of negative feedback around that. Most of the time, anyone that has a negative opinion won't actually voice that opinion. So you don't really get many at all, but you got to think about what you have to gain from it rather than thinking about what other people are going to have to say from it. Now, there is a lot of upside to me starting this podcast. I've really enjoyed the process. I've really gained a lot from it. I've really grown a lot through that process. But if I didn't start it in the beginning, if I was too held back by what I thought other people would say about me, then I would have never put myself out there. I would have never grown. I would have never gotten other opportunities that I have through this podcast and been able to grow my business and things like that. So thinking about what we can possibly gain from it rather than being in that negative mindset of thinking the only scenario that can come from this is I'm going to get 100 messages tomorrow from people saying how bad it was. You've got to remove yourself from that mindset, because chances are you're not going to get those messages. And thinking about what it could possibly do for you in the positive scheme, even if it doesn't reach what you think it could do, even if I think that by starting a podcast I could go viral tomorrow and get 100,000 downloads in a day, if I don't achieve that, I'm probably still achieving more than what I thought the other way around was, what I thought the negatives were. Isn't the chance of starting a podcast and starting something you really enjoy and starting that moving forward into possibly something that could see you really happy in the future, isn't that upside a lot better than the chance of the negative opinions of other people impacting you? Now, you won't get a lot of messages from people, but in the odd instance that you do get a couple of messages, is that negative from having a few messages or a few people actually say something to you in person? Is that negative going to outweigh the positive experience that you have from achieving something in your own life? I don't think so. And I think we need to start rewiring ourselves to think about it in the positive aspect, because as a whole, thinking about things as a hypothetical really isn't a great way to think about it. But if you are going to think in hypotheticals, let's think about what is the best outcome and only focus on that. Because if we're focusing on what the best is, even if we land anywhere below that, it's still going to be a lot better. And we're not worried about what those negative people are going to have to say. In the end here, I think my whole point is that if you want to do something, just go and do it. Stop worrying about what other people have to say about you, because in the end, it's more of a reflection on them. It's not a reflection on you. And it's more of a reflection on you if you're not starting something based on what other people think. It is hard. It's hard to put yourself out there for the first time. It is scary, but it continues to get easier, and it will get easier every single time. Every time you start something small and really build up, it will gradually get easier. I know when I first started my Instagram account, and I've spoken about this on the podcast before as well, I know that when I first started that, really being able to put my own art out there in the world was a really scary prospect for me, because I'd never actually put something out there before that I'd put time and effort into. And so I was opening myself up for rejection in that aspect. I was also opening myself up to a lot of different avenues from people who didn't know I was interested in that sort of stuff before. Changing the sort of career journey that I was on into some sort of artistic career was a really scary thing for me, and scary to put that out there and really have it so openly that people could see that I was sort of transitioning away from what I was working on before and moving into a new area. And that for me was really scary. That was really scary to get that out there in the world. So I was trying to really find a place for me to really present my art to the world and really find satisfaction in that, because I was really enjoying the process. But in doing so, I created this space where I was opening myself up for other people's opinions. I was opening myself up for that sort of negativity that we've spoken about, for other people to have something to say about it. In the end, I didn't get any messages from anyone saying that it was a bad thing, but that was really something that did hold me back in the start. And I'm so glad that I pushed past that. I'm so glad that I started this podcast. It was something that really scared me in the beginning, to put myself out there and to put my own opinions out there in the world and have it be so accessible on a platform like this. So I'm so glad that I did that. And I'm so glad that every time I've made a decision, I've not let that fear hold me back, because in the end, I know that if I did let that fear hold me back, I would regret that. Whereas I haven't regretted any decision that I've made that I've then had to go back on. If I started this podcast and I got a few episodes in and really didn't enjoy it, the regret of having to stop that wouldn't have been as high as if I didn't never start it. The regret that I would have had in a year's time if I never started it. So you won't regret the decisions that you do make, because in the end, those decisions will teach you more than the decisions that you didn't make. You will always regret the decisions that you didn't take, or the decision that you didn't make a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You'll look back on that and regret that decision. If you start it and really don't enjoy it, then you won't regret the decision to stop. I don't think it is ever in the position that you'll regret stopping, because at least you gave it a go. You will regret the decision that you didn't start. And so I don't want anyone out there to be held back by the fact that other people may say something, because in the end of the day, who cares what they have to say, because they may not be here in 5 years, whereas you may regret the decision that you didn't take it in 5 years' time. So to end this episode, I want to really give a call out to you guys. I really want to open it up to you guys into having a think about what it is in your life that you haven't started because of some sort of fear of what anyone else could have to say about you. What are you caring too much about what other people think, and what haven't you started because of it? Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? Is it a YouTube channel? An Instagram account? Are you wanting to start posting dance videos on TikTok? Is it that you want to start a new job? You want to start a new career? You want to start a business? You want to end your job? What is it that you're not doing because you're too held back by what other people have to say about you, or what you think other people will say about you? What you think other people will even think of you that they won't even voice about you? What is it that you're not doing because you're held back by what other people have to think? I think about this all the time, and there are probably a few things in my life that I'm still held back from. And there's probably stages where I'm not really pushing hard enough. I'm not going as far as I possibly could, because I'm scared that if I go too far, then people will say something. I'm scared that if I try too much, then people will say, well, I'm trying to do too many things. Or I'm scared that if I try to be above where I think I need to be, that people will say, well, maybe you're not ready to be there. So these things do hold me back too, and I'm not going to be blind to that fact. So all I want you guys to do is have a think about it, and have a think about what those things could possibly be, and really run through the scenarios. Use that positive mindset and really take advantage of that, and really know where these things are holding you back. And hopefully you can start these new things without that fear, because that is the aim, and that is the whole aim of this episode, but that is the aim in all of our lives. I think we really want to do things and hopefully have an actual positive impact, and not look back in 10 years and regret the decisions that we didn't make, because you will regret the decisions that you didn't take more than you regret the decisions that you did. So that is where I'm going to leave today's episode, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this bonus episode. Just something that I was thinking about through the week, and I thought that I would come and voice it here on the podcast. So if you did enjoy this episode, guys, I'd really appreciate it if you did share it around. It really helps me. It has helped the podcast grow quite a lot over the past couple of weeks, actually. I've had a few people share the podcast around, and I've been sharing it around on Instagram a lot more. I've been using these sort of snippets from the videos and sort of posting them on social media and things like that. So that has been really helping. But if you guys could share it around as well, and share it with someone who you think would enjoy this episode, I think this could help a lot of people. And if I've been struggling with it, I know other people have been struggling with it as well. And that's the reason why I make these episodes the way I do, because I know that if I'm feeling something, I'm probably not the only one out there feeling it. So hopefully this is able to impact someone, and someone will actually gain a lot from this. So if you think that there is anyone out there who could gain something from this, I would really appreciate it if you did share it with them. I'm sure they would appreciate it as well. And just lastly, before we go, do remember that my print store is open till next Tuesday night, the end of August 2021. So it's open on midnight on Tuesday. If you guys are at all interested, feel free to have a look through there. It'll be open till Tuesday night, as I said, and I really hope that you guys are able to gain something from that, whether that be just from your own business perspective of really wanting to start something. So with that being said, that's the end of this week's episode, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. I have a very special episode coming next Monday, episode 33. So hopefully you're all on the lookout for that one, and I think that one will be really enjoyable episode for you all. But until then, have a great week, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye.